Okay, so hey guys, and welcome back to another Axel 72 video, and in today's video I'm going to be giving my prediction for the Diego Pacheco versus Kevin Lele Sadjo fight. And so if you are new around here and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so, like the video if you do indeed like the video, and feel free to join the Patreon as well. You can request any kind of combat sporting related content and I will try my best to get out there for you guys. I really appreciate all the support in which I've had with it so far, and of course the link will be in the description. Let's get straight into this one though, and to be fair, this isn't a bad card, a fight in which I'm not going to be speaking about, but is on this card, which I did just want to kind of give a little mention to, is of course the co-main event, which is Joe Cordina versus Flores, which is again a decent fight and meant to be an eliminator for Abdullah Mason's WBO title, but I'm not entirely certain that it's going to go either way. It's a difficult fight to be confident in a winner for that one, in my opinion, just from what I've seen from both fighters in the past. But again, it's an interesting fight, and I think it will decide if Joe Cordina is able to reclaim a world title, which again, I'm not too fully sold if he is going to be able to do that. But of course, like I say, this is headlined yet again by Diego Pacheco. He's getting used to headlining these kind of big slots and these big bills with Matchroom. But for me, this is finally an opportunity to where we're going to be able to see just how good Lele Sadjo is. He has been around for, at the top of the division, kind of floating around as an undefeated guy for a little while now. I mean, a couple of years now, and he's never really been truly tested by an elite guy. Even though he was European champion, he won it against a guy in the Carolis who had 10 losses on his resume, and his most recent win was a guy who was 14-9. So again, that kind of spells out a lot as to what Lele Sadjo's kind of career has been. And I mean, from what I believe, again, I've tried to do a bit of research on Lele Sadjo. I'm pretty sure he started boxing, or at least went into the professionals at 25 years old. So that shows that he did start quite late, and I understand that. And if he had just started boxing at 25 years old, then at the same time, you do kind of have to say, yes, they do need that time to, go through them fights and to get themselves into a good position. But I understand that, and I don't mind that, because plenty of fighters have had to do that in their career to then go on to have success. But it's when they're getting these opportunities and getting put in good ranked positions off the back of not really fighting that many guys. I understand, you can't help who was, offered to fight for a European champion. If you're offered to fight a guy with 10 losses on his resume for a European championship, then you will do that. But it's the other guys on the resume. It's like, say, fighting continuously in France, having guys who are 14-9 who you're fighting when you're 27-0 and a former European champion. It just doesn't really make much sense. And also the fact that Lele Sadjo and his team have been, from what it seemed from an outside perspective, he seemed quite annoying to work with or frustrating for other promoters to work with. He doesn't have a major promotion. He's, to be fair, one of the best talents coming out of France at the moment. I mean, him alongside with, Mbili, who's kind of been representing Canada a bit. They're both talented guys, and Sadjo, I think, does have the opportunity to cause and to be in some good fights due to his style, but he's had multiple purse bids kind of floating around him, with the main big one that never kind of ended up happening was the Mbili fight, like I've just mentioned that name there. I mean, that went to purse bids and never ended up happening, and then he kind of moved on after that to then accept earlier this year, I think about May time, he accepted an eliminator against Ozes Iglesias, who, if you don't know, is a real up-and-coming fighter in the super middleweight division, who I've been talking about for a little while. I would really recommend you go and watch, because he's had some highlight reel knockouts and he's a great fighter. And then, to be fair as well, back when he was European champion, which really wasn't that long ago, he was made and kind of set to fight with Callum Simpson instead, who at the time, yes, maybe wasn't that big of a name, so it's understandable why you would go kind of and avoid that. But you avoided that to then go on to fight for an IBF eliminator, and then that IBF eliminator never happened. So again, it's a bit weird. I don't believe this is any sort of IBF eliminator either. So again, it's just a bit strange, and now at least, like I say, we get to see him actually fight and contest against somebody who is, not proven at the elite level just yet, but has shown that he is a talented fighter, like I say, far more talented than what we have seen with Lele Sadjo so far. For Pacheco, obviously, this is a good chance to expose a possible phony elite fighter, like I've talked about, and he is, I think, with this fight, starting to step away from fighting world level gatekeepers to now elite names a bit more. Not to say that, like I say, Sadjo is an elite name, but at least he's a highly ranked undefeated fighter. He's fought a couple undefeated fighters, Pacheco, like Nelson was the most recent one, and he did have a few problems with Nelson, to be fair, and he does seem to have continuous problems with smaller fighters like Coqueras as well, Pacheco, and to be fair, Lele Sadjo is quite a bit smaller than Pacheco, but like I say, he is now slowly starting to kind of step away from the gatekeepers. I hope if he does get through this one, then he doesn't really take a backward step and go on to fight, somebody that we've seen lose to another kind of higher level guy, because that's kind of what he did when he fought Trevor McCumbee. I mean, there was nothing wrong with that fight, and I think it did show a bit. I mean, it showed that Pacheco is very skilled and he was able to dominate, but it showed that he didn't really want to change gears and he didn't really want to take any kind of risks. So again, it makes you question if he's ready for the elite time just yet, but again, we will have to wait and see, and we will also have to wait and see what's happening with the super middleweight division at the moment, because the current super middleweight champion, of course, is Crawford, and he was undisputed, and now he's lost his WBC belt due to not paying the sanctioning bills. So he's been forced to vacate that, and the WBC have already ordered for a new champion in Mbili versus Shiraz. I'm pretty sure that fight has already been ordered now. So that's a great fight. But I also have a feeling that Crawford, his next fight, whenever he chooses that to be, it might still be a little while away, but whenever he chooses for that to be, most likely will be in the middleweight division or possibly the super welterweight. I have a feeling that a super welterweight might move up to the middleweight division and then Crawford might fight him there, unless there's a standout guy in the super middleweight division. But unless Shiraz wins, possibly they could do Shiraz versus Crawford, but I mean, I'm not too sure. I mean, if Mbili wins against Shiraz, then they're probably just going to make Mbili versus Martinez too, which it should be the fight to be made, to be fair. So again, it's an interesting one. It's a strange one, but possibly the belts all might become vacant. So for somebody like a Pacheco and a Lele Sadjo, if you do bide your time a little bit longer, but still fight the other elite guys around you who are also waiting, because there is a bit of a queue, then you could get your opportunity to fight for a full world title, in the not too distant future, with it being a vacant title as well, or be elevated to that if you get in a good position. But speak about both fighters individually. Pacheco is a fighter. He's somebody who is able to use his kind of long limbs well, keep that range well for the most part, and really find his jab quite impressively early on. He's got a measuring jab, and it's good because a lot of people try and use a measuring jab, but they just leave the jab out there, and it can, lead to you getting caught over the top, and it can lead you to not really know what to do if a fighter comes in a bit closer. But he measures it well, but then also pulls it back to where it needs to be, well, kind of where it needs to be. He does leave his hands a little bit low, but still in a better position. And then he can also box in and out afterwards as well. And, he can come and bounce back off that jab pretty nicely and then set up for you to lean in and then to counter off of that, which, to be fair, he's able to do well with the solid timing in which he does have. He goes and lands power to the body. I would just really like to see him use more body work. I mean, when he fought, I think it was Solecki, he managed to knock him out in the 7th round with a real nice body shot, and that body shot was open for a lot of the fight, but it did just take 7 rounds for him to actually use that shot, which again landed really well. It's a real nice shot, and he does have that power, but he just didn't use it early enough. And to be fair, he hasn't really started to use it any bit more, even since the knockout. He can outbox his opponents, and again, I think that's what he was able to do against McCumbee very well. And he's quite an accurate and, when he's in his rhythm, efficient puncher for the most part, and he can effortlessly kind of cause damage. I mean, McCumbee's nose was quite damaged. Obviously, there was a head clash early on, but he was still able to damage him quite a lot by just peppering the jab continuously, and was able to cruise to a victory. Obviously, when you're fighting, I mean, a lot of fighters like to just go out there and have a war, but at the end of the day, for your health, it is best if you take as minimal amount of damage, but then still be able to inflict the most amount of damage as possible. And to be fair, he was able to do that for the most part against Macumbi, who can be dangerous. I mean, Caleb Plant learned that as when they fought. So he can be a dangerous, and he can be, a hard puncher when he wants to be. He's hard to land on quite clean, especially when he is when you are fighting him at a mid range, unless he, does his really lunging in shot, and you can catch him over the top off that. But even then, it is still quite quick, so it is quite difficult still to land on him cleanly. He's got very good fundamentals, and he can close the fight pretty much, often as soon as he turns up the tempo a little bit. But again, it's actually him turning up the tempo, which again can be the difference. Negatives about him, I think for the most part, he does kind of only really throw in singles, especially in close. He only really throws a lot of singles, and it's not always good enough to be able to stop his opponent. Sometimes you can get a real impressive knockout, but sometimes you can't, and then you have to work for what you can do from there. He's not as comfortable in close. He forgets his body work, like I've mentioned. He doesn't follow up on a lot of his work. He's not really wanting to change gear very much, and like I say, up the tempo. He doesn't really pair up his jab enough. If he was to pair in a double jab, that would be a bit nicer to see every so often. He does start slow and doesn't really like a physical fight, which again will be interesting to see if Lele Sadjo, who's been used to knocking out a lot of guys in the early rounds, if he starts off quickly and wants to make it a physical affair, which normally he does, how Pacheco will be able to deal with that. He can be timed when he's lunging in. He's, like I say, not really putting his combos together too well or too often. He can struggle punching downwards, which has been something which has been shown. And again, dealing with that pressure and the fighters who are going to get in close. He's able to use all right movement, but he does go back in a straight line. And then when he's on the ropes, he's not always the best at actually circling off. And he doesn't use much head movement either. So he does seem to struggle, like I've talked about, with these smaller fighters. And again, Lele Sadjo is that. To speak about a bit more of Lele Sadjo, he's somebody who does carry power from his physically strong build. I mean, he's a very physical, bullish type of fighter who really will try and push you kind of around the ring and really try and push you off of him. He's got a tight guard. He wants to work in the pocket. He's aggressive. He's hard to get off. He does something which is a bit unique to an extent. I've seen a couple of fighters do it, but not that often. He, instead of throwing a hook where you have your hand kind of twisted, well, not twisted, but you have your hand kind of going off, your regular type of hook where it just goes round. He kind of twists his hand as though he's going to throw a jab, but then twists his arm around as well to then loop him for a hook, but keeps his jab, his hand twisted as though he's going to throw a jab. If that makes sense. If you don't, then I would recommend going and watching him fight. And I don't know if that generates more power or not, but it's a unique thing, I suppose, that can catch opponents off guard. He's got pouncing attacks, and he really will launch off his back foot, which isn't always the best because it can put himself in vulnerable positions if he is to get caught. By a single especially, it could make him be off balance, but it does, of course, lead to more power. He will often repeat what's working for him, so if he lands an overhand right, he will then follow up with another overhand right, and that's when, again, you can really start to pummel the opponent because they're not expecting them multiple big shots in the same place where you've already damaged them once. He can often get all his opponents pretty much onto the ropes. Again, will he be able to do that and get past the jab and the work of Pacheco? Again, we will have to wait and see. Like I say, he's trying to push you off of him, and he will rip off the guard basically, and then go and throw a hook of his own. So if you come with a tight guard, he'll try and rip off that guard, take it down, and then land straight as soon as he takes it down. And that's a true kind of offensive one to deal damage type style type fighter that will do that. And negatives about him, he's flat-footed. He's not really had to deal with much people kind of stopping his pressure. Again, he's not really had to deal with a fighter who's actually got a really good jab and has that possibility to work off that jab and then to be able to make him miss and then make him pay. He squares up a lot. He does always seem very intense when he's attacking, which does make me possibly question his gas tank if it goes into the later rounds. His accuracy isn't always the best in close, and he will often be chasing his opponents around the ring. He won't fight at a mid-range, and he pretty much just won't use a jab either, and he can't fully, or he doesn't really fully extend his punches out either. And often, with his aggressive mindset, he wants to be on the chest, but it means he's leaning his head in, which could lead on to Diego Pacheco's uppercuts. Who do I think is going to win in this fight? The thing is, there's part of me saying that I could see Lele Sadjo actually going out there and getting the upset and stopping Pacheco, but I'm going to go with a Pacheco unanimous decision just through the fact that he's going to be able to time him coming in on multiple occasions. If he can keep his hands high, circle off the ropes, don't just stay on the ropes, and, Sadjo is there to catch when he's coming in, especially. It's just you're going to have to be aware of the big kind of loaded up shots that he's going to throw. It's not always the cleanest, it's not always the tidiest, and he does leave gaps, Sadjo, when he's, like I say, he's coming forwards. And I think Diego Pacheco is going to be able to exploit that. I don't think he's going to be able to stop him, but he possibly could late. I'm going to go with a Pacheco unanimous decision, and he just has to show perhaps a little bit more, and he's going to have to fight at a bit higher of a pace than perhaps he's most comfortable at, which, again, I think he can do, and he's shown that he can do against the likes of a Nicholson and a Coqueras against these smaller opponents, but he doesn't always seem to like to do it. So again, I think it's going to be another uncomfortable fight for him where he can get through, but then show that he's still not ready for the real elite guys in the division. But again, at the same time, you look at the real elite guys in the division, and I mean, bar maybe a Shiraz, or a Canelo, you could, or of course like a Crawford, again, that's kind of a different level. You could look at an Mbili, and you could say Sadjo, again, his style is similar to Mbili's. So if Pacheco can get through Sadjo, then, maybe you could start the argument of saying that he is able to get through something like an Mbili. Again, it's an interesting thought, and of course he has to win this fight first, and then who he can go on to fight next. I mean, like I've touched upon, Mbili is fighting Shiraz from what I believe next. So if Shiraz wins against Mbili, then the Martinez fight probably should still happen. Martinez should be in line for the winner of whoever wins that fight. But if he isn't, then that fight versus Pacheco for Martinez is there if he is willing to take it. But it's a much more riskier fight, so I understand if he's not. If not, an Oslas Iglesias fight I would love to see, and I think would be a great fight. And I think, like I say, really should happen. Or possibly a William Skill fight could be a good fight as well. Again, possibly. I mean, it would be a very boring fight, I think, if that was to happen with, of course, Pacheco wanting to and preferring to fight at a slower pace and Skill just running around the ring the entire time. But when you look at the rankings, it kind of does make sense, to be honest. But moving on now to speak about the Skye Nicholson versus Yulina fight for the WBC interim World Super Bantamweight title, and this fight will hopefully be setting up for the winner to fight Ellie Scotney, which, well, I mean, it should be the case, but I'm not entirely sold that it will be based on the outcome, if that makes sense. So I think if Luna wins, then it will definitely happen, because it would be a big upset if Luna wins. Nicholson, having a loss on a home show and everything like that, it would be a big upset. But if Nicholson wins, on paper, she's most likely going to, she then is still with Matchroom. And I'm not entirely sure if MVP and Matchroom are willing to work together on this fight. Obviously, they're working together on the whole Anthony Joshua Jake Paul thing, but that's a different kind of thing. This is a fight which should be main event worthy, and Matchroom has spent a lot of time building Skye Nicholson, so I don't know if they would just be willing to allow her to just go and fight on a main event on another show on possibly Netflix. And if it's big enough to fight on Netflix, it could be a DAZN show. Most value promotions do DAZN shows, but can you make the argument that perhaps it's bigger than one of their DAZN shows? Again, I'm not too sure. Whereas a Matchroom DAZN show could be good for this, but obviously Ellie Scotney used to fight with Matchroom. Are Matchroom still wanting to work with Scotney? Are Most Valuable Promotions wanting to allow Ellie Scotney to go back onto Matchroom to fight? Again, I'm just not too sure. But that should be the fight that should happen next, because that's the fight that makes sense. It's the only other real kind of interesting fight in the division, of course, if Skye does beat Yulina. Skye obviously has been on a rebuild since her loss and moved down in weight. She has managed to get 2 early stoppages, which she never had in the featherweight division. Of course, she was kind of always known and kind of referred to as like a pillow-fisted fighter in the featherweight division. But again, since moving down into the super bantamweight, she has gone out there and got 2 stoppages. And they do look good as highlight clips, but again, you always do have to look at the level of opposition. And I mean, I think if she does the same here against Luna, that would be impressive, even though everybody is writing off Luna as a nobody. Luna isn't a nobody, she's a former 2-weight world champion. But again, we will have to wait and see, because obviously the level of opposition in which you've seen from these clips of Skye Nicholson since moving into the featherweight division, they look poor. I mean, the fighters are turning around, the fighters are looking, uninterested when they get hit. They just look like they want to find an excuse to get out of the fight. So again, Skye Nicholson, her style has changed a bit, which I'll touch upon in a minute, but is that for the better? Again, we haven't actually seen at a high level just yet. Like I say, Luna is a former 2-weight world champion. She held a IBF world title 11 years ago at this weight. Then more recently, I think in 2022, she was the WBC bantamweight champion, winning it in what I class to be her best win against long-time champion Mariana Juarez, which was, an impressive victory for Luna to get. And then she defended it against Mayeli Flores, who was also a good win for her as well, because if you don't know Mayeli Flores, she just fought Zarenya Romero and actually beat Romero via split decision. And Romero has been on Matchroom cards. She's somebody who was actually tipped as a good fighter coming into the professional side of things, and she was the world champion going into that fight, I believe. So for Flores to win that fight, again, that was impressive. So that's aged well as well. But then, she lost dominatingly, but not via stoppage, against Dina Forsland, who, of course, is somebody who I actually rate as a good fighter. And since then, she's kind of been ticking away out in Mexico. She had one fight after she's had 3 fights after the defeat against Forsland, but the one afterwards, she fought I think it was 6 round. It might have been an 8 rounder, actually, thinking about it. And it was quite a controversial one. Yeah, it was an 8 rounder against a Mexican opponent who was seen as a bit of a journeywoman. She's not had loads of fights, but her record wasn't the best. And she had a very close fight in that one. But again, maybe that was just a stylistic matchup which wasn't in her favour. Again, we will have to wait and see. And when you kind of speak about Luna's fighting style, I mean, I would compare it to, the somewhat similar style to the quote-unquote older version of Skye Nicholson. And when I say that, it's kind of the low kind of hands, can't deal with pressure tremendously well, but will try and, like say, just catch you with single shots, try and kind of move around off the ropes and circle off, and then pick off shots when she can. And again, that was very similar to what Nicholson was doing. Obviously, we haven't seen Nicholson tested with this new, like I say, quote-unquote style, that she's using this more offensive style. And if, things do get difficult for her, will she just resort to going and kind of running around the ring again? Of course, we will have to wait and see. But with this new quote-unquote style that Skye's had, she has shown more aggression, she's been planting her feet, and she's been trying to use more combinations. And recently, she's been trying to, like I say, look a bit more aggressive as well when she's throwing, and is, like I say, really trying to put a bit more into her punches. And again, for an actual, fan that wants to see violence and things like that when they're watching boxing, that's what you want to see. You don't want to see a fighter just running around the ring the entire time. But she might be forgetting some key defensive fundamentals whilst being offensive. I think sometimes when she's throwing her combinations, her balance can be off. She does seem to have to, commit a bit more when she's throwing the hooks. The hooks don't seem naturally fluid to her. They don't seem to all come off the hip. She has to really lunge in to be able to get a hook. But that's because she's always used to throwing from quite far out from her style. So again, it's going to really be interesting to see what happens if she does face an elite level fighter and gets in a tough test. I think she's going to win this one via unanimous decision. I don't think she's going to be able to go out there and get a stoppage. I think she's going to be able to put on a good performance though. But I think Luna's tough enough to be able to make it to go to a unanimous decision and could even catch Nicholson with a few shots when she's, like I say, being aggressive and being offensive. She's still not really keeping her guard up that well. And I still think, with her being more aggressive, she's actually leaving herself more open to take shots. So I think a Skye Nicholson will win via unanimous decision, and then hopefully, as a fan, I would want to see the Scotney fight next because I do think it is a great fight, and hopefully it would sell well, and hopefully it will be made. But I mean, if not, then I'm not too sure what to do with Skye Nicholson, to be fair, because there really isn't a tremendous amount of other fights, and I think fans are kind of getting a little bit, you know, restless in wanting to see Skye Nicholson get in another big fight because we all know that she is a good fighter and that she can beat upon, these lower kind of ranked female fighters. Even though Luna is still a good fighter, just she's not at that level, and we saw that because of the run in which Skye Nicholson went on as champion before she fought Tiara Brown. But if the Tiara Brown rematch is never going to happen, then she needs to still show that she's in it against some of the best female fighters. And the Scotney fight is a great fight because Scotney's on a great run herself and is looking kind of unbeatable at the moment. So again, we will have to wait and see what happens. But yeah, that is it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like the video if you didn't, like the video, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.